Hi, I'm Dr. Brian Thornburg, and today I am joined by Chad Taylor. He is a personal friend, and I have him on the podcast today because he is the father of a severely autistic child, unable to speak, unable to take care for himself. He will need assistance, personal assistant, for the rest of his life. And with the recent White House disclosures that there is a crisis with autism, that there appears to be some type of connection between the use of Tylenol while pregnant and subsequently autism in the offspring. Also, with the notice that there appears to be some cognitive and behavioral improvement if the child is put on leucovorin, which is a folate agonist that it's ruffling a lot of feathers in the autistic community. From one aspect, it's ruffling feathers in the community among parents of autistic children because it has now reached a national dialogue. Whereas before, the understanding that Tylenol may be connected to autism and that leucovorin was helping autistic kids was much more fringe. I knew about it. Chad knew about it. Parents in the area that were looking outside of the mainstream medical field knew about this. And now this has all been validated, but well known inside of our community that works with autistic children and the parents of autistic children for a very, very long time. I mean, we're talking years and years and years. But now that this dialogue has been brought to the national stage, we're having parents of autistic children have different perspectives. Some parents feel that we shouldn't change how the autistic child is going to move forward in life, that there is an identity of autism, that we want to honor the autistic child because that's how they came out, that's how God made them, and that's how they should remain, and that we shouldn't seek, but we should accept. Then we have another camp that is looking for possible cures or avenues to improve the functionality, the activities of daily living with the children. Just to put some numbers to this, currently there's about 1 in 33 children born in the United States will be diagnosed with autism. This is significantly increased over the last 20 to 30 years. When I was a child in the 70s, there was zero autism. I did not see autism. You once in a while saw a quirky kid, but autism was not, just frankly, wasn't seen. And we can argue about, are they defining autism differently? Well, that is true, but from an insurance reimbursement perspective, because insurance reimburses for autism and was not reimbursing for Asperger's, which was autism light, all diagnosis moved to autism in order for these children to receive therapy, because the earlier therapy can begin, the better the outcomes are for the child, regardless of where they are on the spectrum. And so we do have more children being diagnosed, but still comparatively to 30, 40 years ago, there is a significant increase. And also, bizarrely so, in California, the number of boys that will be born with autism is something like 1 in 18, or something significantly more prominent than what we're seeing on the national population numbers. So there is, as I mentioned, there's a debate going on in the autistic parenting community about the mention of that this is a crisis by the White House, and these two different camps are starting to mix words with one another. And Chad wanted to have a talk about this as somebody who is living with autism every day because of his son, and the effects that it has on he and his wife. For background with Chad, he is a former Marine. He was an educator at Apple for many, many years and trained people throughout the company. He left Apple voluntarily during COVID because they had a mask requirement, and his son with severe low-functioning autism couldn't wear a mask. This then interrupted Chad's ability to spend lunchtimes with his son because they wouldn't allow him to enter the store, yet they would let other people enter the store who might have some, if I recall the story correctly, who might have some personal issues with a mask, but they wouldn't let his son in with a mask. And Chad made a decision at that point. His family came first, and he adjusted his income severely in order to prioritize his child. So not only is a father of a child with autism, he's also somebody who will take severe steps to prioritize his family in a way that was very impactful. They didn't know how they were going to survive financially when he left that job because he was the sole breadwinner. And they have taken additional steps since that time. He was in public school, and the public school system was providing a lot of services for him, but he was still having a difficult time. So mom decided to step out of the workforce and stay home and homeschool their son. So they are living the autism, the whole autism effects of decreased financial ability, constant care needs for a low-functioning autistic child, and then future concerns of what are we going to do when he turns 18? He's going to need a guardianship through the court. What are we going to do for the rest of his life and our life as long as we're alive? What are we going to do after we pass away, and who's going to care for him? So he's facing it, and he is in the middle of an ongoing and evolving debate about how we should handle autism. And well, welcome, Chad. It's
Thank you.
quite a bit that you've gone through, and you are certainly. I'd really like to hear your perspective, because here's a dad living it and having people online criticize you for looking for ways that your child might function better, as opposed to taking an identity approach and saying, this is my child, he has autism, and I accept him for who he is. And we don't worry about improvements, which there's a certain acceptance and a certain honor to that as well. So it's not that one side's right and one side's wrong, but there is an attack occurring because one side is feeling threatened by the other side.
I thank you for framing that way, and thank you for having me on and give me a voice. You know,
Yeah, of course.
I think, you know, when you're talking about autism, you know, it's often referred to as a spectrum, right? And I feel like that term can be a bit nebulous for some people. And it really, I think, greatly hinders on your experience with autism, you know? And I think that's where kind of these you know, I want to say two camps, but I want to just be clear. I'm not in any camp per se. You know, my goal is to unify us all, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're on this little blue planet together, and we need to work together. But I think when you talk about the spectrum, people that have more experience on the kind of the less severe end of the spectrum, you know, people that are more functional, they can talk, but they maybe have some social quirks where maybe the dialogue doesn't go back and forth as smoothly. They don't like to be in big crowds, perhaps. Maybe there's some repetitive behaviors there. That would be considered like what we call level 1, you know, autism.
What used to be called Asperger's.
Right. And then there's and when you talk to people on that end of, you know, that have more experience at that end of the spectrum, you start to hear a lot of words like acceptance, respect, unique abilities, you know, things like that. And personally, I think all people should be viewed that way, especially children. So I don't disagree. I just think it's not limited to autism when you start using language like that to describe it. But when you start to talk about more of a severe end of the spectrum where, you know, someone like my son, he's nonverbal, he can't care for himself with basic things like basic hygiene, you know, feeding himself, you know, preparing his food, things like that. He can't do any of that on his own. He needs our support 24/7. Where when our side of the community starts talking a bit more about solutions and potential cures, prevention perhaps, people on the other side of the community some people, not everyone, but some people tend to be a bit attacking on us. You know, because they see it as an attack on their kid. You know, when you talk about it being a crisis, for example, you know, some people interpret that, well, you're calling my kid is not a crisis. And I just want to be clear. I don't think that the White House intended that to be the case. I call it a crisis, but I'm not calling any child a crisis. I just want to be clear about that. Children are not a crisis. The rise and the prevalence of autism, that is a crisis.
Right.
Especially when you look at, you know, the more severe end of it, where someone requires 24/7 support. I mean, caretakers on that end, I mean, they're struggling to have a personal life, you know, just to get to groceries. I mean, just to give you a little example, getting groceries is very difficult it's just one of us, my wife or myself. And often that wouldn't happen unless we did an Instacart, which can get expensive, or one of us has to be home and the other one can go. Well, I just got a big shout out to Publix. My wife made a phone call to Publix because there's something called I think called a Caroline cart, where an adult could sit on the shopping cart, and you can still put groceries in it, and it's easy to maneuver. Those exist. My wife called Publix, and they got one at our Publix. Now my wife can go to Publix and go shopping, because before that, my son's a toe walker. He tends to elope, meaning kind of walking away and kind of wandering. Very difficult to do when you're trying to get groceries done, right?
Right.
And then, not to mention, certain things could trigger him, and he could have a bit of a meltdown there. He can get very loud. We're already used to the looks, because he can be loud at times when we're out. That doesn't bother us anymore. But just being functional, that was difficult. But Publix, within a week, got this cart at our Publix, and my wife can now go grocery shopping. Something as simple as that, it can be debilitating. And I can only imagine. I mean, when I think about how many people are doing this alone, because let's face it, it's people, when you're dealing with a disability, especially something that's that severe, it's stressful in a relationship. The divorce rate's between 80 to 85%, when
Wow.
you have a diagnosis like that. And fortunately, my wife and I are rock solid. She's my best friend. She's my problem solver. She's my lover. She's my everything. I love her to death, and she's amazing with our children. I'm fortunate. I don't know how, and it's usually the moms dealing with this. The dads tend to kind of opt out. And it's sad, because I don't know how single moms are doing it, especially if they have other kids too, atypical children on top of that. It's overwhelming for anybody. It's overwhelming for us at times. And we work together. We work extremely well together. I can only imagine what it's like. And then, God forbid, that mom wants to go online and express the way she feels, about, I wish there were some solutions that could help my child. And then someone comes and attacks them. Because I'm not here speaking for me. I can take it. You can throw anything at me and I'm good. But it's the other people out there that are struggling even more than I am. I want to help be a voice for them, because it's important to understand a perspective outside of your own. I really believe in that. And I think there's a lot of people that, because of the White House announcement, so many people are talking about autism now. Many of them are speaking not from experience. Or certainly not from experience from another end of the spectrum where they might not have seen before or dealt with firsthand. And I would just caution people to pause before responding, especially when you see someone that may be struggling with it online. Pause before responding. Really try to think about try to take that perspective that they may have, or really, try to understand, what does more severe autism look like? And could that be a crisis for them? Because for some of us, it is. I got to be honest with you. I would give both my arms I'd give both my arms to have my son be more independent, to know that he could grow up and be able to be independent and find work, that satisfies him, fall in love, get married, have children. That's not a reality for him. Unless something significantly changes with interventions, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about sometimes.
Well, it's hard. Well, it's such an emotionally charged topic. And so here you have an autistic child, whether you're a level 1, which is a higher functioning, or you have level 3, which is a lower functioning. Mm-hmm. It's an emotionally charged topic, because we love our kids and we don't want anything bad to happen to our kids. We certainly go on Papa Bear, Mama Bear defensive mode if somebody attacks or challenges our kids. And that's even with typicals. Yeah. But now we have more opportunities if you have an autistic child that you're going to be attacked. And now within the autistic community, there appears to be a rift, because the dialogue has moved onto the national stage. And the word crisis, you've mentioned it, and I take that tends to be the nidus where the disagreement is a crisis. And because it's an emotionally charged topic and you hear the word crisis, and if I can understand, if you have a level 1, it's not a crisis. It's like, I honor my child. I'm happy that I have a child. I'm happy that he's healthy, hopefully in other ways. Mm-hmm. And I want to let them be the person they can be. And I have a patient in the practice who is autistic, and she's a mom. She's high functioning, obviously. And the father of the baby is also an autistic. And they were together since high school, and they had the support of their family, and they had children together. or a child together. So when you hear crisis, that doesn't sound like a crisis to them. No, that would be an attack, a personal attack, which then puts up mama bear, papa bear. But when we say crisis, as I see it, in the way that the White House used it, they were speaking more as a population, as an epidemiologist, not to the individual, because it is a crisis across the country. Because even if you have a high functioning, there is a lot of services that need to go into that child before they can become a functional adult. Also, these parents of these grown adult children who now have a child, they have to live nearby. There is typically a grandparent that comes into the appointment with the parent just to make sure all the dots are being connected. So they don't want to hear that there's a crisis. They want to feel more normalized or typicalized, if that's even a word, but they want to feel more mainstreamed. But then for somebody that's in the severe world where you can't go on a date with your wife, you can't find a babysitter, how are we going to handle this situation after you and your wife pass? Those are serious questions. And they clearly lend themselves to this is a crisis. So there's probably an issue with just one diagnosis rather than speciating it out from mild to autistic. Do you think that's part of the negative dialogue that's occurring?
I think it is. I think when you start to wrap up, a child's identity with the diagnosis of autism or the condition of autism, I think that's where it becomes a bit problematic, because the child is unique on their own, with or without autism. And just to give you some context, like, my son, he's nonverbal. He doesn't have any real back and forth, dialogue with you. Even when you address him, even though he does know his name, 5-6 times out of 10, he may not even acknowledge that you're there, but I know my son really well. He has a great personality. He's actually kind of comical, to be honest with you. He does things that crack. He had me rolling laughing the other day. One thing that we like to do, right? He's 12, but he still loves tickle time. We've been doing tickle time since he was 2, maybe. But it's evolved, over the years. Now that he's gotten bigger, he's a boy. He's what we call hyposensitive on the sensory processing part of it, where he seeks sensory input. His nervous system's looking to be woken up, so he wants, things like he likes to jump on a trampoline. He has a swing in his room where it's mounted to the wall, so he swings. It soothes him. We have a variety of different materials of blankets and weighted blankets and sensory toys that really just help soothe his nervous system. Well, one thing he loves to do with me is we do tickle time. I call it tickle time mania. And it's kind of turned into from just kind of tickling him when he was young to now we tickle, we kind of wrestle. It's a little bit of jujitsu, kind of, makeshift jujitsu is what I call it. And he just laughs. And there's times where the other day, I was tickling him and I kind of tickle him a little bit and I'll kind of back away, and then he'll kind of act like he doesn't want to do it, and then he'll kind of sneak up on me. Well, the other day he was doing something I kind of do to him sometimes, where I'll start and then I'll kind of walk away like I'm not going to do it anymore, and I want to see if he still wants me to do it. And then he'll kind of grab my hand, then I'll start tickling him again. And I remember he was trying to trick me. He was trying to do the same thing to me. He's like, all right, I'm going to try to trick Dad. So he acted like he didn't want to play anymore. He started walking away. But I saw him kind of looking at the side of his eye at me, I'm like, oh, does he still want? And then he kind of came at me and he started wanting to tickle me, and then it just started again. And so, he has a great personality in there. It just doesn't manifest in the same way that yours and I's do. So it's not that I completely, I want to be clear. I don't think that the people that are wanting that acceptance, they're not wrong, because all children should be accepted. I don't care what condition they have. I think we also have to accept, though, that there's another side of this story that they may not have exposure to, that also needs acceptance. And the acceptance there is that my kid's not independent, and we need to accept that people like us, we want solutions. And I would do anything to find a solution for my son to where he could be more independent. His personality is still there. His uniqueness is still, it will never go away. I don't care if we completely eliminate all the symptoms of autism or not. Personality is going to be there regardless. And that's with all children. So I think that's something that just needs to get, that needs to be part of the dialogue especially when people are trying to express themselves. Because the other end of this is on the severe end of the spectrum, it only represents about 20 to 30% of autism in general. It's less people that are more severe, but when being vocal is difficult. I mean, many parents are exhausted, and I always think about the single mom that's trying to raise their kid, plus maybe other kids, their kid on the spectrum and then other kids, they're exhausted. Being an advocate is probably far from their thought process, to be honest, because they're just trying to get through everyday life. And when they have the courage to say something online about a piece of their life, I would just ask that other people in the autism community support them. Even though you may not agree with the full thing that they're saying, just support them. Just give them a little bit of just saying, you got this, because many people are drowning and there's not a lot of supports out there for people in that situation. And, like I said, I can take it, but not everyone can. Some people are just on the brink. And I think we need to recognize that.
Yeah, you mentioned an really important point, and that is you're a seasoned parent in this arena. And the other parents that are speaking up have probably also had some resolution in their life about what their autistic child is like. And we've kind of already identified that there seems to be a leveling that allows the parent to interpret crisis differently. Mm-hmm. Higher functioning, no, don't attack my child. This isn't a crisis. But again, crisis is more about populations than the individual. Right. But when you have feelings involved, it's hard to separate words. Mm-hmm. And then you have the parents of the lower functioning autistics who crisis, yes, it is a crisis. And so I think really good to what you're doing is creating a dialogue for the parent who's just finding out that their child has the diagnosis. Because when your child is first diagnosed with autism, it's shattering. It's absolutely shattering mm-hmm. because every parent has in their mental eye this, my child, I'm going to be hanging out with my kid, I'm going to be watching them grow up, and maybe they're swimming on the swim team or they're on the tennis team or the gymnastics, and you just see, and then I'm going to see them have kids, and that's all popped. It's gone, poof. Mm-hmm. And then you don't know what to do, where to go. You have the mainstream approach, you have therapy, and then you have alternative therapies. Mm-hmm. And what the White House highlighted the other day, I would say it's more on the alternative side. Mm-hmm. The alternative functional autism, doctor, Defeat Autism Now doctor, has known autism and Tylenol during pregnancy and autism. There's likely a connection. Mm-hmm. They've also known about leucovorin. But now these alternative treatments are now being mainstreamed. And so rather than saying, hey, we have some kids that may not need it, and I understand all kids are special, and your kid is special, and every child deserves to be special and honored where they're at, but that's different than helping the parent that's really looking for something so they can get a glimmer of hope for their future and for their child's future.
Absolutely. That's, the biggest thing that keeps me up at night is what happens when I'm gone, he does have an older brother, but I'm not going to put that on him. It's not, he's not the parent, he's the brother.
He's a parent, right. Exactly.
So that's a solution I don't have yet. It's something we think about every day, to some degree. And, it's important for people to understand that is a very real side of it. But I think solutions can happen when we work together. We live in a time that's so divisive right now. I think from politics to, what news station to watch. People are just so divided right now. And I think what we need a little bit more of is, and this kind of goes back to, the article that my wife and I wrote in Autism Parenting Magazine. It's about, understanding each other. And that's really it, because what sparked that article was, when we first got the diagnosis and we'd, bring our son with family and close relatives and friends, they didn't really know how to interact with him. They didn't, it was a little awkward for everybody, because, the severe end of the autism spectrum isn't seen very much, and just a lot of people just kind of were awkward. So my wife and I got together and we put together this article, and it was really originally for family and friends. And the way we wrote it was we were trying to describe what autism looks like from his end of the spectrum, and we wrote it from his voice as if he was saying it. And it was just to make it more relatable to people. And we recognize that mommy and daddy is writing this for me. They're my voice. They're being my voice right now, but it was written from his perspective. And it kind of just described, what autism looked like from his end of the spectrum. And it really helped a lot of our family members just understand that, even though he has different challenges and struggles, you can talk to him like anybody else. I talk to my son just like I talk to my older son. I talk to him just like I'm talking to you. I don't talk any different to him. To help him learn things is a little different. We have to kind of drill him a little different to help him learn things, but and just be more consistent with that for it to stick. But I don't talk to him any differently, and that's kind of the point of that article, is to explain what it is, and that you don't have to treat me any different. I'm just like everybody else.
So there's what I'm hearing is that there's an identity acknowledgement by, I don't speak to him differently. You're autistic, and I don't know what you're gathering from the words I'm saying, but I'm going to speak to you in a way that the family operates. It's obviously in a way that's still safe for him. And so there is some of that identity. We're not changing what we're doing. And so we're going to acknowledge where you're at, and we're going to make sure all the safety protocols are in place across the board on every aspect that needs to be identified. And we're going to put you in therapy, and we're going to work with you in every way possible. So there is, where you sit today as a parent of an autistic child, there's an identity, an identity acknowledgement, just like the parents who say, oh, that's fine that my child's autistic, we should honor that, and I'm not looking for a cure. But you're doing that to a certain element up to a certain point. But because it's more severe, you'd also like to understand what's happening behind it. Whereas those parents who have higher functioning level 1 autistics, there isn't that great of a necessity to find that. And so then they're using self-reference criteria rather than understanding.
Right.
So they're using, again, their fear and their personal experience with the understanding or accepting that other people could have a different experience of autism.
Right.
Because their situation is a little different. And because of that fear, it's hard to acknowledge that there might be another path.
Right.
And that's where your article arose from, possibly. You mentioned it was written more for your family to...
Yeah, so originally it was for family, and we kind of got it to many of our family members, and it really just helped them understand. And then you could see him loosen up tremendously around our son. They didn't treat him any different than any other kids, and they would actually kind of go out of their way to say hi to him, just like you and me, which I thought was amazing. And then my wife got really excited about that, and she decided to submit it to Autism Parenting Magazine, and they published it. And that was the goal, is just to really, those, kind of going back to those parents that are kind of new to this, right? Like, I want to kind of talk about that too, because it's not uncommon for anyone who might be new to this and might be seeing this. It is not uncommon to, go through the stages of grief, because like you said, when you have a child, you have these pre-existing things in your head, like, are they going to be on the football team? Are they going to swim? Are they going to play baseball? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? All the things you want them to do, right? And then when you have a diagnosis like this and a condition like this, that's not going to happen. So you kind of, for us anyways, we kind of did go through some stages of grief. And then we started to blame ourselves, because then, because you ask every, at least a decade ago, we would ask every doctor we knew what caused it. We don't know. So we're thinking, man, we're doing our own research. We're trying to figure it out. And we're, what did we do that could have made this happen? And you start to kind of blame yourself. And then we got to a point where it's like, no, we did everything the best that we possibly could. We still are doing it the best we possibly can. And we still might be doing things wrong, but that's okay. That's part of the human existence. We have to be able to make mistakes to grow. And I don't think that we made any mistakes. This is just what it was. Now, I would love to understand what the cause was. I really do. Was it purely genetic? Was there environmental antigens? I really believe that that's the case. But I would love to know that. And then I would also love to know that so other people don't have to unnecessarily have this level of a condition that can be so debilitating. I'd love to prevent that for others. And I'd love to find solutions for my son and for everyone like him. Because, because for me, it's not just about the caretaking end of it. Like, I've accepted that I'm going to be a caretaker forever. I'm okay with that. I can deal with that. What's harder for me though, is to know that my son is not going to get married. He's not going to have that satisfaction of having that kind of a love like that I have with my wife. He won't be able to have that fulfillment in a job where you just, man, I came home and I got a huge win today because I did this. There's a lot of things he's not going to experience for the first time that kind of breaks my heart, and I would give anything to help him be able to have that level of satisfaction in life, like I know I've had. So, we do our best to help him achieve those milestones the best that we can and celebrate the wins where they come. And, but yeah, I just think it's important to consider those things when
there's a dialogue among parents with this. And, so I think what your article did is it created compassion. This is my child. So you have that identity. This is my child. We're not changing that. We can't change it.
Yep.
There's an identity there. But what can we do to make his life better today with family, make you guys more comfortable? So he's normalized, mainstreamed a little bit more appropriately.
Yeah.
And so for new parents, because I think that, it's clear to understand that everybody's going to get emotional with this topic when you have an autistic child. And I can understand how level 1 parents get defensive because they have a child that can go out and have a kid, like the parents in my practice. Their autistic child can possibly go forward and have a kid. And then you have level 3 parents who won't have that. And so there's death of an identity there. Yeah. While you're accepting them, there's also a death of that. I mean, sadness comes from a loss of a potential future. Yep. And so for the new parents that are just discovering that my child might have autism, and you highlighted on something that I'm trying to get to is maybe mom did take some Tylenol during pregnancy. And what I'm trying to get here is, and I don't want to beat around the bush, is we do the best we can. We do the best with the information that we have at the time. And so you will question, what did I do? And if you did take some Tylenol while you're pregnant, but you didn't know, there's going to be things in life that we didn't know what the outcomes were going to be, but they were best intentioned. Mm-hmm. And that's even with just how you parent and discipline your child and a typical kid. So what advice, you kind of mentioned that you guys had to go through the 7 stages of grief. What advice would you say to a parent that just is now coming on a child that possibly could have diagnosed with autism?
Yeah. One, you didn't do anything wrong, and you got to know that. There's nothing wrong that you did. It's right now, I think it's important to focus.
It's the crisis.
Right. It's important to focus on, what does my child need from me, right? What can I do to best support my child? Focusing on that, because, one thing that, my wife and I went on a journey the first year, and we genuinely tried to figure out what causes autism. I mean, we read every study that I could understand. I read a lot of abstracts, to be honest with you. I can understand most of the abstracts, but I couldn't understand a lot of it. But I mean, we went down a road, and we tried, till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, we'd stay up sharing information, reading, studies, and we didn't figure it out. And what we realized in that journey, because you are hurt, you want to know, like, how do I get to a solution here for my kid? I don't want him to struggle. No parent wants their kid to struggle. And I think to try to put in perspective that even though you may find that solution on your own, or you may go down different ways and paths, I think it's important to understand that that's not helping your kid. I think being present for your child and getting to know your child the best you can on their level. That's been the most groundbreaking thing that my wife and I have done. Rather than trying to go all down the scientific road, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be going down, because I'm so glad that the federal government is finally saying that we're going to explore potential causation and solutions. Finally, I've been waiting for that for over 10 years. But there is so much value in stopping and being present with your child. And when I say being present, putting down the phone, putting down all your stuff, get on the ground with them and just play. Just play. My child has learned 40 plus words on an assistive device. And when we got the right therapist, we realized that he learns so much more through playing. And we just play with him and then associate different things we're doing with what he needs to learn with, associating what a ball is, what his water is. When he wants food, he can tell us when he, on his assistive device, he can tell us all those things. But that was learning how to communicate with him through play. Well, had we not gotten on the ground and been present with him, we never would have gotten to that stage. We would have never gotten there.
So accepting your loss, because he doesn't recognize that he has a loss.
Right.
This isn't like Flowers for Algernon, where there was a recognition that I used to be mentally limited. Now I have above average cognition, and then I see myself losing. That he doesn't know that. So he is just in the moment. I mean, he's almost, just pure chi, just pure presence. And so play is a pathway in our brain that is very, very old. Rats have a play pathway. This is how old it is you can make a rat play, laugh by using an eraser tip and from a pencil and playing with their belly, and they will laugh at a hypersonic frequency, which has now been identified. So this is a very, very old pathway that predates cognition, predates rationality. So using a primitive pathway, being present will pay spades as opposed to dragging your kid around to find the next best and then forgetting to play. Yeah. You get more mileage from just acceptance. But then there's still we still want to do what we can.
Absolutely. Right. And when I say find the right therapist, because I think you made a good correlation there, I think it's important to find the right one because, a lot of the therapies that we had them in before, therapists that we had, and we're talking behavioral therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapy. We found a fantastic speech therapist that helped us make that connection because, when we did play with him, I got to know him better. I got to just understand some of his quirks and his personality and, what he thinks is funny and what he doesn't like and all of those things. Like you get to know with anybody. And it was her who helped us make the correlation between playing and learning. And it was just a game changer. But had we not put down all of the scientific stuff and all the road that the rabbit hole we were going down, and just said, we just got to be present. Just be here for him.
And one day every 3 months you go see the Dan doctor.
Yeah.
Or you go to the Dan Marino Center for Autism. And that one day you step out of the play and you go into scientific mode. Yep. Or however often that needs to happen. But on the daily, you stay in play.
Yep.
Because that's going to reach your child, because that is even a line deeper than the autism. And it's in all of us. So that's the common thread.
Yep.
So it'd be compassion and play. Earlier, I may have said compassion was really important between the two camps. So it's compassion and play.
It is.
That is what's going to help a new parent or a parent that's seasoned long-term with an autistic child like you now.
Absolutely. And the kind of bond you create it's like no other. It really is. I can't describe it with words, to be honest with you. But he's my buddy.
Right. Yeah.
And I just can't encourage it enough. Letting go of some of the, the self-blame, like getting through those stages of grief. If you got to go through them, acknowledge them and be present in those moments. And as you work through that, just being there, that'll open up a whole new world to you. That's what we found. And
in those moments of play, the diagnosis disappears.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's just a kid now. You know, when you just get past all that, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty, he has a laugh that is just infectious.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. It's true. It's authentic and it's deep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a smile on his face. I mean, he just, I live for those moments. It's amazing.
Yeah. So That's great. So while we have this national dialogue going on,
Mm-hmm.
there seems to be this discussion, somewhat at times adversarial, between the different parents of the different functioning levels of autistic kids. The real world approach of play with your child and acknowledging kind of dual tracking play and science.
Yep.
What I have experienced from taking care of a lot of autistic children in the practice is it's multifactorial. There's a lot of different causes for autism. There's not one clear path. It might be a mitochondrial dysfunction. They can't fire enough energy to have the brain process information correctly. So it's kind of like the factory's at 20%. So it never actually is able to produce, make footballs like it's supposed to, because it just can't fire enough of the factory up with power to make the assembly line work. So it's a factory, but it's not producing what it's supposed to. So it could be a mitochondrial dysfunction. It could be a dysbiosis. It could be a neuron assault from something from their external environment. Back when vaccines contained mercury, the aerosol, there is a video from the University of Calgary showing the effects of I think it was a microgram of mercury placed next to a snail neuron. And a snail neuron is essentially very similar enough to a human neuron that when that microdose of mercury was added into the media that neuron was growing in, and you could see the neuron growing. And this dose was similar to what would be in a vaccine. I believe it might even been less than what's contained in a vaccine. Back when I want to be clear, vaccines do not contain mercury anymore. But back when they did contain mercury, once they put that little microdose of mercury into the media with this growing neuron, the neuron retreated and almost like it was burned, like a little sapling would burn under sun without enough water, and it just recoiled and turned in on itself. So it destroyed the neuron. So there's another. It could be environmental. It could be, it could be the food dyes, the high sugar load. It could be the fact that there's fertilizers in the food. If we look at generational effects of fertilizers and pesticides, these do have damaging effects on DNA. And so while my grandparents had only farm to table, so there were no fertilizers. 1940, fertilizers were brought into the commercial farming business because they had all this nitrogen left over from the ammunitions from World War II, and they had to do something with this inventory of nitrogen. They turned it into fertilizer. And so now we had food that was being adulterated, and that could have affected my dad's DNA. And then I'm born in 1967. And then in 1971 or 72, the U.S. Congress put forth an act that stopped companies from just producing chemicals without safety testing. So prior to 1972, you could just produce a chemical and put it out into the commercial market, and it was on the onus of the United States to prove that the chemical was bad. So now my DNA was damaged even further. And then in 72, they stopped that. Then in order to bring a chemical into the commercial market, you had to prove that it was safe. So chemicals have really slowed down the introduction into the commercial market since 1972. I believe that of all the chemicals that are approved, 2/3 of them were grandfathered before 1972. I think only 1/3 of the chemicals that are available now are post 1972. So it's that hard to bring a chemical forward by showing safety standards. And then we have my kids that are then born in a period where processed food started, seed oils have started. We have EMFs, we have food dyes. There's much more sugar in the diet. There's an obesity issue. We know that chronic disease has increased. So there's so many different etiologies for having autism that you just can't scientifically point. Well, this is the smoking gun.
Yeah.
So it has to start with a discussion, and that's what the White House has said. We're going to discuss this, which has to be just a wipe of the brow for you as a parent of an autistic child. Yeah,
It
just
was
a sigh of relief.
It was because, you start to explore, right, as a parent. For example, one thing that's always kind of boggled me is, it is a decade ago, what causes autism? We don't know. Well, could it be in the vaccines? Definitely not the vaccines. Every doctor would tell me that. But when you look at it just from an objective standpoint, I mean, you look at back, I was born in 77. So, we had maybe 10 vaccines, maybe 12 vaccines between that and 18, where now it's something like 70, between, from the time you're born till the time you're
Exactly.
18. And I'm supposed to buy that there was no side effects there.
Completely fine for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look, for the majority of the population, maybe that's okay, but you can't tell me that it's safe for everybody. It's just,
There's nothing to say for everyone.
yeah, it doesn't make sense.
When they first created, and I don't know if you know this, you may know this, when they first created the vaccine court, so there's a special court for vaccine injured children, which was created after 1986. And if you believe that your child's been injured by a vaccine, you bring the case to the special magistrates. There's 3 of them that sit on the court. And the very first case they brought before the court was a little girl who was normal functioning, received a vaccine, and then developed autism. This wasn't just any girl. This was the child of a physician, a neurologist at Johns Hopkins. And that's why they put this kid out front. Here was somebody, a dad, who could clearly know that they weren't missing signs of autism pre and post vaccine. Mm-hmm. So there was no argument that you could say, oh, you're a layperson, you don't understand that the signs were there, you just didn't know how to see it.
Right.
So they put this dad out front. First case, Pauline, I think her name was, Pauline, if I remember correctly. And the toxins in the vaccine disrupted her mitochondria to the point that, just like I mentioned, suddenly the furnace in the factory couldn't handle the load of daily input plus the vaccine, and the kid's whole system shut down. And she developed autism. Yeah. She won the case. They won the case. Yeah.
I think I've heard of that case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vaccine court's interesting. My understanding is too the vaccine makers, they get lawyers paid for by the federal government.
They do. They do. They're completely removed from the process.
It's just kind of wild to me.
You're fighting the U.S. government to get paid.
Yeah, and it's like, that just seems like such overwhelming odds, especially when you're dealing with a newer diagnosis and a whole set of challenges that come with that. Plus, you're trying to fight the U.S. government.
Just any lawsuit, even under the best of circumstances, is difficult. Yeah. And now you have your child as the center of the battle. You're trying to find an answer. What's happening? How can we improve this child's quality of life? Mm-hmm. How are we going to deal with the limitations that we now experience because we have a low-functioning autistic child, or even a high-functioning autistic child, because they still need a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of support there.
So it is devastating. So there's a lot of causes to autism, not just a single cause. Yeah. So it can't be neatly tucked away in some single scientific study. So there's when I tell parents, I said, you're going to look for answers, and you're going to look everywhere. But the most important thing is start your child in therapy. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, help them learn how to engage in as normalized of a way as possible, which you've done. Would speak to my child normally. I'm not going to baby this down. They're going to makes it easier for everybody not to have to live on 2 different levels of existence. We're just going to live on one. Children adapt. Of course, you've made adjustments. There's locks up high, and there's a lot of
double locks on the doors. So
double locks on the doors, and I have some of my parents have actually, they put on trackers on their kids, especially once the child's escaped once, then we're not going to go through that again. Yeah. I remember one time a couple of years ago, there was a child during rush hour escaped onto one of the Immokalee Road, which if you're from here, Immokalee Road is very busy, especially at rush hour. And now we had a nonverbal autistic child running loose near Immokalee Road. Well, that kid immediately had a tracker on him after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are things that you do have to do, but you want to put them in therapy. And then the other thing I tell them is when you start to find something that works, you might have a rug pull because it works for a while and then it stops working.
Yeah.
And then you have to go to a new treatment, and you'll hear about it online, or you'll go see a Dan doctor, and that'll work for a while and then it'll stop working. But the thing that wasn't working after it did work will start to work next time. And so it's this merry-go-round of the same treatments being alternated at different times. And
you're right. It's tough, because you get hope. You're like, oh, this is starting to work. This is great. He's giving more eye contact. He's trying to be more verbal. He's trying to do these things, and then boom, it'll drop off. And I've heard that with a bunch of different interventions, many different interventions, and it's kind of heartbreaking. And the thing that we as parents are always cautious about, because there's a lot of interventions I've heard of, and we're just always cautious about, like, will the potential side effects outweigh, what this potential solution could be? Because someone like like my son, just a small change can be a big deal for him. From the material of the clothes you put on him to, so if he has a side effect that could send him into a spiral, I mean, this is tough to recover from, for the whole family. It's not just us, it's the whole family. Yeah. It's the whole day or even the week or whatever the case, So we're always cautious about that. We always want to try to, if we're going to explore something, it's got to be non-invasive, low, a very high safety profile, that kind of thing, the fewest amount of side effects I can find.
Right.
And
then there's night management.
Yeah.
Because a lot of kids don't sleep that well.
Yeah.
And I had one family, he loved playing basketball. So they put a basketball hoop in his bedroom, and they would lock the door from the outside because he was capable. He would open the door and just move around the house. I think he was about 10 or 12. He's now in his 20s. And they just let him play basketball in his room all night. He would just sit there and just throw the ball, play basketball, throw the ball. Nonverbal, low functioning.
Yeah.
They put him into ABA therapy. They very strict. ABA therapist comes with him to all the appointments. They're big. They're 220, 250 pounds. And they're two of them in the same family, and they would run up to me full speed in the office, run up, stop right in front of me, put their face right into my face and sniff me. And if I wasn't used to that, I have a lot of autistic patients, so I don't react. I would just stand there and knowing that this kid that weighs more than me is barreling down on me. And I would just stand there because my reaction can then send everything in a different direction. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's something I noticed too is, my son will, if the tension is high in my house, like there's a lot of stress and there's a lot going on, he stims more. I notice he stims more, where he kind of has these uncontrollable, outbursts, making noise, flapping his arms and things. Where I noticed this early on too, that when he's really having a tough time with something, it's easy as a parent to get wrapped up. And look, I'm not perfect all the time. I'm not trying to come here like I am perfect. I'm certainly not. But when you get, when there's a level of frustration, when he's frustrated, and then maybe you got something you got to do, and you start to get frustrated, it only makes it worse.
Yes.
Right. But I've noticed that when I stay calm, cool, talk to him just like you and I, but in a nice, calm voice, it typically will, it might take some persistence, but typically my odds at calming him down and helping him get through that moment are much greater.
Right. That's good advice.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, just keeping your cool, finding ways to ground yourself, because I think that's another side of it. I'm glad we're talking about this too, is parents need to be mindful of their own mental health as well.
And physical health.
Because this is difficult. It can be, you're going to have moments of very difficult times potentially. And you got to make sure you're in a good space. So you got to take time for you as well. Take time to ground yourself, whatever that is. I like to pray. I like to meditate. I work out every day. 5 a.m. I'm up every day at 5 a.m. That's my time.
And you have a home gym.
I do. I work at my garage. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to make that, you're not leaving the house.
No.
Just want to make that clear. So, because some people are listening, they're going to take what you're saying And I'm going to head off to the YMCA. No, you structured it again, just like
Yeah.
you did on other things.
Yep.
We're going to do this in the house.
Yeah, I built it in the garage, and I just piecemealed it over time. It wasn't anything I did overnight, but I just knew that was good for my mental health. Is staying fit, staying active. My wife has kind of gotten on that bandwagon as well. We do family workouts sometimes on the weekends, which is kind of nice. My older son will get involved. Jackson will be there too, but he's usually kind of just hanging out with his iPad and watching us. But finding ways to do that, making sure you're grounding yourself in some way, where you don't have so much bombardment, because it's a lot, and it's okay. It's okay to have your moment. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in being a caretaker and in the million things that are on your plate, and you're never going to have a clear plate. So if you're worried about trying to accomplish everything you're going to do in a day, just remember that, the day's only 24 hours, and you still got to block off some of that time for you too. So you can be the best version of yourself you can be the next day, or that next moment where it's going to be difficult, where you do need to find that calm, centered dialogue with your child. You're going to be able to find it a lot easier when you've taken time for yourself and built that into a routine for yourself. And I think that's so important in this space.
So compassion, like we mentioned, between the two camps,
Yeah.
the identity and the causal camps, if we even want to grossly divide them like that, but understanding that we aren't having the same experience. So compassion with each other, compassion with self.
Yeah.
Yeah. Creating structure in a way that supports the child, and living with unknown. And and then having forgiveness for yourself.
That's right. Do not blame yourself. And I've seen a narrative online about, some moms are blaming themselves for taking Tylenol and their kid's autistic. Do not blame yourself. That's not healthy, and it's not true. Like you said, you only do the best you can with the information you have.
Do the best you can with the information you have. I mean, I was horrified with seeing these moms popping Tylenol that were pregnant just as this wasn't Trump's administration that identified it. This has been known and published for a long time. It just finally got a national voice, a national platform.
Yeah.
So this wasn't right MAGA, Maha propaganda.
No.
This is Journal of Pediatrics in the early 2000s that taking Tylenol can cause asthma. This is known that Tylenol depletes glutathione, that when a mom takes Tylenol in pregnancy, the Tylenol can pass through the placenta, and so the baby is receiving the maternal milligram dosage in their blood, just like mom, at the same concentration levels. And in pediatrics, we dose medicine based on weight. So a mom weighs 150 pounds, she's taking 500 milligrams of Tylenol, 1,000 milligrams of Tylenol, and the baby, say that they're maybe halfway through gestation, so they're weighing maybe 3 pounds, 4 pounds, and the dosage of Tylenol for a 4-pound baby would be 45 milligrams approximately. And now the baby's having 500 milligrams circulate through their blood, 1,000 milligrams circulate through their blood, consumes all the N-acetylcysteine that the baby has, and that baby no longer has that N-acetylcysteine to create glutathione, because we need N-acetylcysteine to make glutathione. Glutathione is the body's primary free radical scavenger. And so now we don't have a way to protect the brain when inflammation happens. The reason it's connected to asthma is we breathe in particles, we get a viral infection, we get a bacterial infection, there's damage from those elements entering the lungs, and then there's structural changes from the damage, and then the glutathione helps keep the inflammation low. But if you're taking Tylenol, the inflammation stays high. That chronic inflammation, in an adult, chronic inflammation can lead to cancer, autoimmune disease. In a child, it leads to asthma. It leads to neurodegenerative problems like autism or ADHD. Yeah. And so these moms that are popping this Tylenol, that will be a very difficult situation if one, and if it's 1 out of 33 kids, one of those moms is going to have that that bill is going to come due shortly, and it's going to be sad.
Yeah.
And that mom may not recover and she will have an emotional hangover for the rest of her life.
And that's just one of the many reasons why I really believe we need to really focus more on what we have in common,
Right.
versus what we have different. And I would take that and apply that not just in the autism community, but in all aspects of life. Like I said, we live in a really difficult time right now of division, and we need to get past that real fast, because I think solutions are on the other side of that. But we got to start looking and seeking for what we have in common over what we have different, from autism to political views. Because if we can do that, I think there's a lot of solutions on the other side of that, because there's some brilliant people on all sides. And I think we can figure a lot out if we just have that mindset going in.
So a couple of buzzwords have come up during compassion between the different camps, compassion with self, play, presence, and now with this element of different people having different perspectives, is there is a follow the science, a true follow the science here, that there is a connection. And so it's stop living in a belief system.
Yes.
Stop living in a belief system that's politically motivated. Yes.
Well, and when we talk about following the science, I think a key component that a lot of people have to remember is science is only as good as the most accurate, newest information. Because, something that we thought many years ago, and please correct me if I'm wrong here. For example, I think there's a time in history where pregnant moms were told that to smoke cigarettes to curb their nausea, right?
Right.
Well, we found out later that was not good information.
Right.
Yes. And there's many other examples of history like that, but that was the best information we had at the time. And I don't blame those people, because that's what they thought was right. But now we have new information, and we need to, that's what real science is continuing to dissect what's going on there, finding the highest truth, and then that's what we follow. And I think we need to remember that, and because when you get caught in a belief system, that is when we start getting caught up in pregnant moms popping Tylenol like crazy. I don't want anything bad to happen. I don't care what side of any
you don't want
views
nobody wants to have an autistic kid just to prove a political point. I mean, no.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
And I don't want to see anyone be, injured or hurt because of something like that. That's crazy. So I think that's when we come to a more sensible, mindset, and let's look for what we have in common. If we just switch just a little bit, instead of saying, I don't like what you have to say, so I'm going to say all the things that are against what you have to say, that counter your view. Instead, all right, what is it that I do have in common with this person? Especially in this autism community and this discussion that's going on. We both maybe have autistic kids. Maybe you have a different end of the spectrum or not. Offer each other some support.
I call it getting curious.
Yeah.
Instead of being judgmental, get curious.
Yes.
Instead of morally judging, get curious.
I imagine a world if we could just switch that just a little bit more. If we can inspire more people to be more curious instead of judgmental, imagine what we could do with that.
Right. I think that's a good place to end. I think you summed it up right there.
Great conversation today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was
Thank
good.
you. Appreciate it.
All right. Take a look down at the comments. We're linking the article that Chad wrote with his wife, and the title of the article is "A Letter of Understanding and Unconditional Love," published in the Autism Parenting magazine. Check it out. Understand that autism is multifactorial. We are starting to create a much needed national dialogue on possible causes. The science is always evolving. Remember, at one point, people were excommunicated from the Catholic Church and possibly killed because they believed that the sun was at the center of the universe, and that was science at the time. And when I started medical school, the very first day of medical school, they told us that half of what we're learning in medical school will be obsolete by the time we graduate medical school. Science is approximately 10 to 20 years ahead of medicine. So what you are reading in the journals may become dogma in the next 5 to 10 years, but widely unknown because it's only just first appearing in the journals. So with that, stay curious, don't judge, be compassionate, and remember to play. Thanks.